the entire talk is in the two parts. One is about the fundamentals of joining of metals, in which I'll be primarily talking about the like what we should keep in mind while developing a weld joint, and the second one is about the advances in GTA and FSW processes. Okay, so here the general approaches of joining of metals, fusion based joining process, and the way by which these fusion based joining processes affect the performance of weld joints, and then need of the solid state joining processes, and the factors which matter for the performance of weld joint. And thereafter I will talk about the advances associated with the two types of the joining processes. One is the like fusion type where GTAW will be taken up, another is like FSW or FSP related processes. Okay, so you know that it would be the best situation if a joint is developed between the two components A and B without doing anything. This would be the best situation, but things do not happen automatically. In this world, nothing happens automatically. You'll have to do something. Likewise, here joint between the A and B will also not be developed automatically. We have to do something. However, if it can be done, really that will be the best situation. We have this kind of joint which is really weak. Like you put the two slip gauges together, they will be connected for a while with the little force. But the kind of the bonding which is there in really not very good in terms of their load carrying capability. So those cannot be used as a joints. They come closer and they bond together because of the closeness, but that cannot be used for engineering application purpose. So what is the way out here is like A and B are joined together. So next better option here is like let's put something which connects both A and B together, and it may be in form of like you must have heard the words like M-seal or put adhesive between the two. So the chemical interaction between the two components and the adhesives take place, and that's how joint is formed. The good part of this approach is it doesn't affect the parent metals in any way. It is just the chemical interaction which is taking place between the adhesive and the parent metal, right? Since the base metals or parent metals largely remain unaffected, and therefore the two like A and B, the parent metals maintain or retain their identity in terms of the mechanical metallurgical characteristics. Okay, so this is the best situation, but this is another second best situation. But the problem with this is that the load carrying capability of the adhesive joints is very limited. They cannot sustain the higher harsh service conditions like temperature more than 50-60. They will start decomposing, or in the external atmospheric conditions they may get degraded very rapidly. So they do not survive under each and every condition. Non-load carrying capacity joints can be developed where it is, especially if the load is compressive in nature. Probably adhesive will still be okay. Then the third better option is like let's the two A and B. So this is the second one. The first one where two are being brought together directly without doing anything. In the second better case, you put either the adhesive, so the joint is formed between the two A and B, or the third better option is like A and B are heated, and between the two you put in like low melting point materials, which may be in form of brazing material or the soldering material. In both these cases there is no fusion of the parent metal, but a little heat is supplied, and that whatever heat is supplied is really not that harmful. That harmful is a really very relative word. It doesn't affect the things to such an extent that the the performance or the capability of the parent metals is adversely affected or compromised. A little addition, a little heating will bring in some changes, but will not be adversely affecting the parent metals characteristics. So the brazing and soldering is another option. That's the fourth option, wherein what you can say, okay, let's have some kind of the joint which can be used to connect like very dissimilar materials. You can join aluminium and steel, or aluminium, copper, or titanium, stainless steel, provided the load requirement, the joint is not load carrying type, or the service conditions are not that harsh. You know, the brazing and soldering joints are also not to be considered very high strength kind of joints, because their performance start deteriorating very rapidly at higher temperature. Their load carrying capability is also limited. So this is also not very good maybe for non-load carrying joints. So these can be used, or for light service conditions these can be used. Okay, so far these the four approaches were not adversely affecting the things or the parent metals much, but the joint capabilities were also not that good. So what are those approaches which can be used to have a joint which can perform as good as parent metal or even better than the parent metals? In that connection only we have the two broad approaches. One is wherein let's put A and B together and deform them plastically in such a way that the mechanical interlocking or huge plastic deformation of A into B or B into A, some kind of intermingling takes place, leading to the development of metallurgical continuity and the metallic joint across the two. So this will be the fifth option, where we are applying the force. Mostly it is compressive force, so to facilitate the plastic deformation. Whenever plastic deformation is happening between the A and B, you will notice that the metallurgical continuity between the A and B is being developed. So this is what typically we get in case of, like, say, FSW or your ultrasonic welding process or explosive welding process, like that. Okay. Now if you see another approach which is there in form of let's say another approach wherein the enough heat is applied across the edges of the parent metal so that the fusion across the interface, fusion along the edges of the plates take place. Sorry, let me activate the pen. So the next idea is to apply heat so that the fusion of the edges of the parent metals can take place. But when this is done by applying the heat to facilitate the fusion, of course a molten weld pool is formed. But at the same time, part of the heat is also dissipated to the thermal conducting underlying metal, and this thermal conducting underlying metal leads to the increase in temperature of the parent metal also, and this in turn brings in certain changes in the parent metal. And these changes may be in form of metallurgical changes, in form of the mechanical properties, maybe in form of corrosion properties. So all those things so the zone next to the fusion boundary, which is heated, gets modified in terms of the mechanical, metallurgical and the corrosion properties. And so this is most of these changes most of the time are unfavorable. These are unfavorable. So unfavorable, we'll talk about these things in detail. We want that these unfavorable changes, which is being highlighted as yellow zone in the weld joint, fusion weld joint, this zone is as narrow as possible so that the undesirable changes in mechanical, metallurgical and other property form, those changes are minimum one. But these are very directly linked with the amount of heat that we are supplying. If the joint can be developed with very little amount of heat, then these zones will be very narrow. If the amount of heat, if the development of the joint requires a lot of heat to be supplied for facilitating the fusion, then of course the size of these zones will also be wider, and so more compromise with the properties will be taking place. Okay, so here if we see yeah, this is the kind of the preferred way is this: if the joint can be developed on its own, or if it can be developed to serve the given purpose by adhesive, or if it can be developed through the application of the bracing and shouldering, or if it can be developed through the plastic deformation only, like in ultrasonic explosive welding or the friction welding, or we have to supply heat to facilitate the fusion. So in these two cases we get the joint as good as the parent metal properties, but in other cases the joint is weaker. So that is why a lot of work is done on these two processes also, to see really how joint can be developed with the minimum compromise in the properties of the parent metal. Okay, so now this is just a schematic to show how the two processes can be significantly different when we are using the fusion welding or when we are using the solid state joining. So just to demonstrate here, what I will do, I'll take this laptop in tablet mode. Okay, so maybe my camera will not be visible, but hopefully I will be able to do this lecture properly. Heat affected zone. So if you see, if we take the two different types of the metals, like steel and aluminium, aluminium is say precipitation hardenable and steel is transformation hardenable. If the two are joined, how will they behave? The first thing is, since the A and B, like steel and aluminium, they don't have compatibility with each other. So when they are brought in the molten state, they interact together, and they form undesirable intermetallic compounds, which is most of the time hard and brittle, cannot take the load, so the joint is cracked immediately. But this is not just one thing. The second thing, when the heat is applied for fusion welding, steel responds in different way. Like next to the fusion boundary, one zone is being formed, which is leading to the hardening. So hard and brittle zone is developed in the steel side. On the other hand, because of the greater thermal conductivity of aluminium, we get the wider heat affected zone. Here it is somewhat shallower one or narrow one. So here aluminium, which is precipitation hardenable, this will be leading to the grain growth or dissolution of the precipitates. So means precipitates get dissolved, and as a result of this, here we find lot of softening is taking place. So the point is, if we are welding aluminium and aluminium, then obviously heat affected zone, both the sides will be softened. On the other hand, if the steel and steel is welded, then it will be leading to the hardening. Many times this softening and hardening is so high that this leads, in the steel side, it leads to the complete embrittlement or loss of toughness. Toughness is very badly compromised. On the other hand, here you lose strength, so the joint, a weak zone is formed in the aluminium side. So here what we have to see is steel and aluminium are not compatible with each other. That is why this is being formed, IMC. But in any case, if we can avoid also formation of this by using suitable filler, we can have a suitable filler so that hard, brittle, low strength weld metal can be avoided. But what we can do as far as the HZ is concerned, we cannot do this anything. For HZ, really we cannot do anything. What we can do is we can reduce its width, because whenever heat is supplied, heat will be dissipated to the aluminium as well as to the steel side. So the problem is not of the weld metal, problem is primarily associated with the HZ. And HZ is like something that you cannot eliminate. So in development of the weld joint, the weld we can choose as per our choice, weld metal we can choose as per our requirement, but you cannot do anything for the heat affected zone. And therefore lot of efforts are put in to understand really how the HZ is being compromised. Okay. So this is what I have written here. In the fusion welding, the maximum heat input or lot of heat input is given, and because of that we find a hard and brittle HZ. On the other hand, aluminum side we get the softened HZ. So efforts in the development of the welding technology or the approaches or the processes or procedures, whatever we adopt, efforts will be to bring down these two adverse effects associated with the fusion welding. Okay, so that's what is there in fusion. So when we make efforts to bring down the adverse effects, one of the approaches is where let us not supply heat externally, but inherently or under the in situ conditions, if any heat is being developed to facilitate the deformation, that is fine. So as far as the solid state joining, like it may be like ultrasonic welding or explosive welding, in those cases the heat generated is extremely low. Rise in temperature is hardly 4, 5, 10 degrees even at the interface. But there are many solid state joining processes also wherein a lot of frictional heat is generated, and that is used intentionally, that is generated intentionally to facilitate the plastic deformation of the edges of the parent metals to be joined together through large scale plastic deformation. Okay, so when this is done, so you know that in FSW there is a tool, there is a pin, and through the frictional heat the metal is softened, and then through the large scale plastic deformation joint is formed. But still, if you see amount of heat that we are generating through the friction and through the plastic deformation, that is still lower than what we have supplied in fusion welding, and that is why the HZ being formed is still lower both the sides. So the adverse zone, the size of the heat affected zone, that gets reduced to some extent because of the limited heat delivery to the parent metals. At the same time, what we see that the metals are interacting in solid state. If the two are not compatible with each other, then they will be interacting in the solid state, and when they are interacting in the solid state, the extent of the IMC formation, intermetallic compound formation, undesirable intermetallic compound formation in the weld nugget as well as at the interfaces, that is reduced. So adverse effects of the IMC formation in the weld is also reduced. At the same time, HZ size is reduced. So one is HZ size is reduced, another both the sides, and the IMC formation, undesirable IMC formation, that is also reduced. So this is good, and that is why not just like the brazing of the aluminum and steel using the fusion based welding processes or some other welding process, here it gives you reasonably good joint. To understand the implication for the same type of the metal, you have to just see like how, if the aluminum and aluminum is welded, then what kind of the HZ and the weld will be formed, or what if the steel and steel is welded, then what kind of the HZ and the joint will be formed. So we'll talk little bit more about this. That is, as I said, in the steel side, since the HZ hardening is taking place, so what you will notice, that hardness will be going like this as soon as you approach to the HZ. Okay, so base metal hardness is lower, but as soon as you approach to the HZ, hardness goes high. On the other hand, aluminum, say hardness is lower, and as soon as you approach to the HZ, your hardness goes down. So it is just opposite effect that you are getting, and depending upon the kind of the contribution which is coming from the steel and aluminum side, in these cases it is mostly the aluminum only, so the hardness is in general lower, except that iron pieces are coming from the steel side, if the iron particles are coming from the steel side. So if it is just steel to steel welding, the weld will be like this, and if it is aluminum to aluminum welding, then weld will be like this. So it is just opposite. Like this is the PH system, precipitation hardenable aluminum alloy, and this is the transformation hardenable steel. So the way by which the weld or HZ are responding to the same, that depends on the type of the metal. Okay, in one case here softening is taking place, and another case your hardening is taking place. So why all this is happening, about that we'll talk little later. So here this is weakening the joint strength, and this is strengthening it, but leading to the embrittlement or loss of toughness. So both are not good. So what can be done? So this is just the background for both solid state as well as the fusion based joining process. It offers the low heat input, that's fine. HZ size is also limited, and the weak zone formation is also limited due to the less heat affected zone. So now this is something which is more generic in nature. You know, in fusion welding, what we do, just a minute, use this cover. In fusion welding, if you see what we do, this is parent metal, both the sides, okay, and then you apply the heat and you apply filler, okay. So when the two are applied, you get a weld metal after fusion of the boundaries. So this filler and heat will be less or more, that will depend upon the process which is being used for welding purpose, or the kind of the thickness which is there in the kind of metal and its thermal conductivity, etc. Okay, so heat will be more or less which will be supplied for developing a joint, that will depend upon these parameters. I'll talk little later about this. But filler, what about filler? Filler can be same as that of the parent metal, and in that case we get a kind of autogeneous kind of case where no filler or electrode of the same no filler or no consumable electrode is used, or there is another situation wherein the exactly same filler is used. So you get a different kind of the approach in development of weld joint. So in one case, with the filler or consumable electrode is used. So this F or filler you can choose as per your requirement. Like say the base metal is of 200 MPa strength, both the sides. Now filler you can choose of 100 MPa or 300 MPa. It is your choice. It can have ductility of 100 joule. It can have it can have the toughness of 100 joule, or it can have ductility of 20%. While the base metal may have just 50 joule toughness, or your elongation is just 10%. So it is your choice. If you want to go with the weld of the higher strength, higher toughness, higher ductility, and you use it accordingly. So this zone is of your choice. You can choose it as per your need. The base metal, of course, is the purpose for which is being joined. So as per the design you have taken the base metal, that is fine. But how about this HZ? This is not in your hands. HZ can be finer or it can be wider, right? So what we should do is, in this situation, you can regulate, you can choose your own filler to adjust the weld metal composition. You can choose the base metal as per your need, as per the need of the design. But what you can do for the HZ is not in your hands, because when you supply heat, it may get softened or it may get hardened like this. So if the softening or hardening is taking place, then this is a troublesome area, and that is what is to be taken care of. Otherwise, despite of having a weld joint, let's say many times what we see, you develop a joint, it doesn't fail from the weld, but it fails from elsewhere. So in any case, if there is a failure of the joint, then the purpose will not be solved. If the base metal is failing, it's fine, it is the design fault. But if it is failing from the HZ or from the weld metal, it is the failure of the welding. So what we have to do is, we have to take care of the HZ also. It's not like we cannot close eyes from the HZ. So we can choose the suitable filler to have the weld metal as per our need, but we cannot do anything. And what we can do to reduce, we can reduce the HZ size. So HZ is something that is to be focused on. Okay, in autogeneous welding we don't have much in control. We have certain things. Let me talk little bit about that. Okay, say in autogeneous, what is happening, like A, okay, and you are just fusing using the GTA arc or PWA arc or your laser or any other thing, and after the fusion, what you get the cast structure and the kind of the cooling conditions experienced by the weld metal. That will dictate what properties you will have. These properties may be good, these may be bad. So for transformation hardenable steels, it's not a problem, but for many metals you don't get the strength same as that of the parent metal. So in case of steel, certainly you will get this kind of trend because of kind of transformation which is taking place. But in other metals, the hardness distribution may be completely different. It may be like this also. Hello. Yeah. So in autogeneous also, like say, it may be on the hardness or strength distribution may show this trend or this trend. So depending upon the kind of the application or the purpose for which joint is being developed, we can take a call if this will survive or this will also be okay. Then next is, as far as the performance of the joint is concerned, these are the different things that affect in the performance of the joint. One is the soundness. Soundness, whether it is defect free or there are some bead geometry related issues or poor metallurgical structure. So soundness is one thing, and the way by which it's weld and HZ is being affected in process of the development. So HAZ and weld properties, the soundness, welding metallurgy, mechanical properties, and the residual stress. These are the can say the 5 factors that affect the joint performance. So as far as the weld metal is concerned, soundness, of course, like this is like the development of proper welding procedure specification and proper trained worker or trained welder can help in development of sound weld joint. This is fine. As far as the weld metal is concerned, in weld metal also we have the option, we have freedom to choose any suitable filler. And based on the like preheat or the post heat treat conditions, we can alter the metallurgy of the weld as well as the heat affected zone. So if these are being applied or not, and whatever mechanical properties we are getting, mechanical properties of the base metal, you see, this is a two-way thing. I'll give example for this. If you start with the weld metal, base metal of say 800 MPa yield strength, you will find residual stresses as high as 800 MPa. And if you have the yield strength of the base metal is 350 MPa, so obviously this will correspond to 300 MPa. That's fine. So the thing is, high strength metals, they have less tolerance to the defects, pores, cracks, whatever you have, and as a result of this it will show cracking or fracture very frequent, because such kind of the metals usually they will have very low toughness, low fracture resistance, fracture toughness, and as a result of this you will frequently see that weld is failing in a very catastrophic manner. On the other hand, if you see it is 300 MPa yield strength of the base metal, then the HAZ and the weld which is developed is like say autogenous, or the weld has been developed using the matching strength filler, then this is the kind of strength that you will get, and such kind of the weld always offer you like very high toughness. Fracture toughness is high, like say 100 or 150 joule, so it's fine. It is very good, like say 20 to 30% of the ductility. So such kind of the joints will have a very good tolerance to the defects, discontinuities, stress rages. So all discontinuities can be easily, the joint can be withstand against these discontinuities very effectively. So it is good. So that's how the base metal properties also affect the joint strength, joint performance. Many catastrophic failures take place just because the joint was developed in very high yield strength metals. So under the severe tensile residual stress conditions, due to the embrittlement, things could not really work, and the fracture occurred in catastrophic manner. Residual stress is another thing, like the weld joints, because of the differential heating and cooling, experiences like the high tensile residual stress. So this is something that we don't want, because it reduces the tensile strength, it reduces the toughness, it reduces the fatigue resistance. So things are being compromised very badly. So all efforts are made to bring down these residual stresses. The related example only with this is like the two components are being joined like this using a filler of 350 MPa or 800 MPa. What you will notice, the expansion and contraction of this only will be leading to the development of the residual stress. So 300 MPa filler metal or weld is electrode or the weld metal strength can offer like residual stress of this range only. Otherwise these will be too high. on the other side. If it is so, use of the low yield strength electrodes or the fillers also help in reducing the residual stress related problems. So that is what is our choice only. At least it gives us option. But heat affected zone, what can be done to bring down the heat affected zone? The only thing is that let's work on the proper sound welding procedure specification. And one of the main thing here is the heat affected zone. If the HNet is low, our HZ will also be low. So that is what is needed. And if due to the variety of regions, like selection of inappropriate welding process, inappropriate the preheating, or inappropriate welding procedure specification, if the heat input is too high, then obviously it will be leading to the wider HZ. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So weld metal, as I have said, weld metal is the properties of performance of weld metal is being affected by these factors, like what filler or electrode is being used, what is the kind of the dilution which is taking place after melting with the base metal, melting and mixing with the base metal, then the soundness of the weld metal, like if there are pores or inclusions or cracks, then they will be reducing the load resisting cross sectional area, and thereby they will be affecting the load carrying capability. And then there are like the discontinuities in form of cracks. So these will be again reducing the load carrying capability. A weld thermal cycle is another important thing, like you supply high heat or the low heat, that will be affecting the weld thermal cycle directly of both HZ as well as the weld zone. You must have heard, like if you use the submerged arc welding, heat input is very high, like say 5 kilojoule per mm. So the weld size is very large, the grain size is very coarse, heat affected zone is very wide, so very coarse grained HZ as well as the weld is developed. On the other hand, if you use low heat input process, like it may be like the plasma arc welding or the laser welding, these will be delivering very less amount of heat, maybe 0.1 to 0.5 kilojoule per mm, leading to the extremely fine grain structure, and the kind of properties that we get is also completely different. Okay, so these are the weld metal related thing. And soundness of the weld metal in form of like pores, inclusions or cracks. Cracks certainly are affected by the kind of cooling conditions and the composition of the weld metal, but the pores and inclusions, these two are influenced by the way by which we are protecting the weld pool. So protection of the weld pool and the heat input, these are the two things that will be affecting the properties of the weld metal. Like if the oxygen and nitrogen in the air is interacting with the molten metal, then these will be forming their oxides and their nitrides, and these in turn will be leading to their presence in form of inclusions. On the other hand, if these gases get dissolved, then the dissolution of these gases will be leading to their presence in form of pores, and both will be reducing their load resisting cross sectional area, both will be reducing their load carrying capability by reducing the load resisting cross sectional area, and so the performance of the weld joint will be reducing. Further, they will be acting as a stress reliever also. So it is good not to have the discontinuities in form of pores, inclusions and the cracks, and therefore it is important that weld metal is properly protected. So there are various approaches. You can use the inert gas atmosphere using like helium or argon, like in GTA or GMAW processes, or you can use CO2 also in like gas tungsten arc welding, or it is also used in SMAW processes, or it can be used like in form of vacuum in laser beam welding process, or in in electron beam welding process vacuum is used, and in laser welding process we use the inert gases like argon or helium are commonly used. Okay, so depending upon the kind of metal systems, choose the suitable protection approach for protecting the weld metal from interactions with the atmospheric gases, interaction of the molten metal with the atmospheric gases. Okay, so as I said, the heat in welding, heat in fusion welding is supplied to facilitate the fusion of the interfaces, fusion of the fang surfaces, so that joint can be developed in fusion welding process. But apart from the fusion of apart from the fusion of the fang surfaces, when heat is supplied, it works in many ways. So the heat in joining can be used in number of ways. When heat is supplied on the surface of the parent metal, moisture is evaporated, so obviously auto cleaning or removal of the hydrogen and all that will be taking place. In some of the oxides get decomposed, and so that's how the cleaning takes place. And due to the differential properties, like the metals expand more as compared to the oxides, so some of the oxides are broken down also due to the heating. So application of heat also helps in cleaning. Then melting of the fang surfaces, this is the purpose of fusion welding in a number of cases. Heat application also helps in lowering the yield strength, so that is useful in case of the deformation based joining processes. So lowering the yield strength and increasing the ductility help in the deformation of the then the fusion. Then the heat is also used in diffusion bonding for developing the metallurgical joints, so that like the two components are in extremely smooth finished state, they are brought to the high temperature, brought in contact with each other, and when they are heated in vacuum at a high temperature, diffusion across the interface takes place, and that in turn helps in development of the weld joint. Okay, so this is about the role of heat. And the heat in welding affects in number of ways, like heat input affects the weld thermal cycle, like say if it is more heat, high heat input or low heat input. So the weld thermal cycle is one thing, weld thermal cycle time or the production rate is one thing only. It is not that big point, because if the heat input is very low, then you will see the solidification is taking place in just 0.5 or 0.9 seconds. It may take 2 seconds. It is like this. So the solidification time is different. When the heat input is high, solidification time may be longer. Otherwise it is very short in general in welding. The heat input directly affects the cooling rate, and cooling rate in turn affects the solidification rate, and solidification rate affects the grain size, inclusion and gas entrapment tendency. Higher the solidification rate, greater will be the inclusion and gas entrapment tendency, so the chances of the defect will be more, while the high cooling rate will be reducing the increasing the solidification rate, and that in turn will be reducing the grain size, but entrapment tendency for the gases and inclusion will be high. So then the mechanical properties, because of the grain size and the kind of the phase transformation which will be taking place, the mechanical properties are affected. Most of the time there is an improvement, except in its transformation hardenable steels. High cooling rate will be leading to the grain refinement, that in turn will be improving the properties. But if the transformation hardening metal systems like in steels or the cast irons, high cooling rate will be leading to the embrittlement due to the martensitic transformation. Alloy segregation tendency is more, especially when the cooling rate is low, slow cooling rate conditions, because there is enough time for things to segregate at the center and so as to promote the solidification cracking. But when we have the high cooling rate, the solidification time is less, so the rejection of the alloying elements during the solidification that will be less, and so the segregation tendency, element segregation tendency is reduced, and that in turn help in reducing the solidification cracking. Okay, so higher the cooling rate, higher the solidification rate, lower will be the LY segregation tendency. Greater the LY segregation, greater will be the cracking tendency. So likewise, we can relate it with the performance of the weld. Now, what we can do and how the heat is being, because heat directly affects the cooling rate in the welding, and that heat, so there are two ways. One is the heat being delivered is affecting the cooling rate, and the second, heat being supplied is affecting the HZ size. Okay, so if we increase the H net, then cooling rate comes down and HZ increases. This is a simple relation. Just a minute. Both are harmful. So it is always good that if H net we can reduce, then this will increase the cooling rate and this will reduce the HZ. This may not always be favorable as far as the transformation hardenable metal systems are there, because there we use preheating just to control the cooling rate so that the embrittlement and the cracking of the weld joint can be avoided. So this is just like a kind of compromises to be achieved. So this is important thing, like power density of associated with the welding process directly affects the heat that is to be supplied and how it is related. Just to understand this, let us see that what is the kind of power density offered by the different welding processes. So the minimum is for say around 500 or 100, maybe 1000 or so. So it's for the gas welding process. It is like 10,000 for watt per centimeter square for manual metal arc welding, about 1 lakh or so for MIG welding, and then about 1 million 10 to the 6 for plasma arc, and then electron beam like say 10 to the power 7 or more than 10 to the 7, then 10 to the 8 for the laser welding. So the thing is, this is the trend of increasing the power density, starting from say 1000 to 10 to the power 8. So the power density associated with the welding processes are different. The different welding processes offer the different power density, and how it is related. If we have low power density, then we have to supply the heat for fusion for longer time. And for the welding processes which offer you higher power density, they can deliver the required heat for fusion in shorter time. So by this logic, there is another important aspect, like say for fusion every metal needs certain amount of heat, maybe say like 10 joule per mm cube, just for an example if we take. So low power density process, how much time it will take, and high power density process, how much time it will take. So obviously to deliver the given amount of the heat, low power density will take a longer time as compared to the high power density. This will take shorter time. So if we are supplying the heat using a particular source in very less time, so less time heat is delivered and the fusion is taking place. So the time heat dissipated to the base metal is less, HZ size is less. While if we continue to deliver the heat for longer time to achieve this much amount of heat, then in meantime lot of heat will be dissipated to the base metal, and that in turn will be leading to the wider heat affected zone. So this is not good, and this is the main reason for having wider weld or wider heat affected zone for one type of the process, while it is lesser for other processes. So like say high power, this is energy or power density, and this is the high energy density process, high power density process. So we have to supply the heat for shorter time, and while low energy density or low power density process, we have to supply the heat for longer time. So for given amount of heat, depending on the power density and the time, this is the kind of relationship. Of course, when we are working with the low power density process, we have to supply the heat for much longer time, because in meantime lot of heat will be dissipated to the underlying base metal. Okay, why it is good, why it is not good? So when we have to supply lot of heat input to the workpiece is very large, like in gas welding process. So thermal damage to the workpiece is high, which may be in form of like metallurgical changes, mechanical property compromises, residual stresses, etc. All that is being developed. So the damage to the workpiece is more when we work with the low power density process like gas welding. And as the energy density or power density associated with the welding process increases, we come across the much better penetration, welding speed is high, welding quality is high, and in general the thermal damage or the damage which is taking place to the workpiece is also reduced. So that is good part. So here the thermal damage is less, and here thermal damage taking place to the workpiece is high, and that is why, and this is directly linked with, so power density associated with the welding process is directly linked with the heat input, and heat input is high for low power density processes as compared to the high so power heat input is high for the low power density processes as compared to that for the high power density processes. Okay, so this is for the high power density welding processes. This is what you can see when we supply low heat or high heat. So for the electron beam welding, heat input is very less, so you see the angular distortion is negligible. With the increase in thickness, you can see the kind of distortion, it is getting negative. On the other hand, it is high, angular distortion is high when GTAW welding process is used. And similarly, because of the more heat delivery, in case of the high heat input process, you'll see with the increase in heat input, the strength is compromised like this of the three different metal systems. This is like 6000 series aluminum alloy, and this is 2000 series aluminum alloy. Okay, so the heat is not good actually for many metal systems, especially the precipitation hard naval metal systems. That's why we in welding we always try to supply as less heat as possible, so that the related thermal damages to the base metal can be reduced. The last aspect associated with this is developing a sound weld joint is this need for protection of the weld pool. Like say whenever the metal is brought to the molten state, its solubility to the atmospheric gases becomes high, and if these gases get dissolved, then eventually due to the high cooling rate these get trapped, and which appear in form of the porosity. And dissolved gases, if they are not able to get released or if they still remain in solid solution condition, then it leads to the hydrogen assisted cracking. So entrapment of the gases in weld pool leads to the pores, and when these gases react with the metals, then leads to the like inclusions in form of oxides, nitrides, and the cracking. As I said, hydrogen gets dissolved in the steels, and that in turn leads to the hydrogen induced cracking. So that's why to protect these undesirable effects, it is important that weld pool is protected from the atmospheric gases. Okay, so these are need of protection. Now as far as the quality of the weld or the kind of the joint performance that we get from the different welding processes, just to focus a little bit here, like say this indicates the nitrogen, dissolved nitrogen in the weld metal and dissolved oxygen in the weld metal. So when a weld joint is developed using the GTA welding processes, like where you use argon or helium only, the hydrogen and oxygen content in the weld metal is extremely low. That is why it is known as cleanest welding process among these arc welding processes. Okay, thereafter you have GMAW or MIG welding process or MAG welding process, where you can use argon, still your oxygen and nitrogen content are lower. When you use CO2, the oxygen is a little higher because CO2 gets decomposed in the arc environment, and that results in the greater oxygen content. If you see submerged arc welding process, it is high in oxygen. If you see some sealed metal arc welding process, it is also high in oxygen and nitrogen both. and self-sealing arc welding like flux core or welding process like oxygen and nitrogen both are high. So the cleanliness of the weld, you see, if your weld metal is having oxygen and nitrogen both, you cannot expect good performance. Why? That's what I will tell you. Here, you see, I think in case of steels, when we have the different or varying content of the nitrogen in the weld metal, this is what happens. The strength of the weld is getting high, that's fine, but many times it is not good. Why? Because we are compromising your elongation and toughness very badly, and because of this, the weld which could have sustained easily during the service now will not be able to sustain, and this happens primarily due to the iron nitride formation. The nitrogen content is too high, it becomes very brittle. Needles of the iron nitrides are found in the weld metal, so it's not good. So strength is not everything, you see. The joint should sustain the impact conditions. The real, it should be fit for use in the real service environment, otherwise it will not work. On the other hand, when the oxygen content in the weld metal is high, you'll see there oxygen, when oxygen is more, it will be reducing the concentration of the various elements in the weld metal. So like say, if everything is fine, if you have chromium, the same amount of chromium will remain there. You say chromium, either it is coming from the filler or it is coming from the base. If there is a certain percentage for low oxygen content, it's fine, it's whatever it is, it will remain there, okay. But as the oxygen content increases, the manganese content decreases, silicon content decreases, chromium content in the weld metal decreases. So basically the oxygen is changing the composition of the weld metal, and weld metal composition is changed means your carbon equivalent is modified. It will change the structure. If the microstructure gets modified, then you'll see you will be having altogether different set of the properties. Your mechanical properties will be different, your corrosion properties will be different, so your properties will be compromised. The point is simple. Oxygen is not just leading to the development of oxides, it is also reducing the alloying content in the weld metal. So alloying content is getting altered or modified. Different elements, the content of the different elements will be reduced in different ways. So you will be landing up with something else that you don't expect in, and that in turn will be leading to the change in structure and properties and performance of the weld joint. Okay, so here now that's what you can see here. Oxygen content in the weld metal is increased, your elongation decreases, toughness decreases, yield strength decreases, tensile strength decreases, all are compromised. Why? Because these will be there in form of, these will be leading to the oxide formation, which will be reducing the which will be leading, see, these oxides will be acting as a inclusion act as a stress raisers. Many times these stress raisers nucleate the cracks, nucleate the voids, and which facilitate the fracture. So oxides, inclusions, stress raisers, and if these are present in large quantity, may be in form of porosity, and that will be reducing the load resisting cross sectional area. Apart from this, alloying element content is also getting reduced, so the structure and composition, everything is getting modified, and that in turn will be leading to the compromised in the mechanical properties. Okay, so these are the various things I have talked about, like the performance of weld joint is affected by the soundness. The one example of soundness I will see in the next slide. The weld metal properties and interfactory zone, heterogeneity in the metallurgical homogeneity, that depends on the weld thermal cycle, mechanical properties, residual stresses, and service condition. Let's see few more points. So when the weld is not sound, what we'll see, there will be like undercut, crack, porosity, inclusions, lack of fusion or lack of penetration, right? So when these sizes are really large, these will be working in two ways. One, load resisting cross sectional area is reduced, or these will be acting as a stress razor. And when it happens, you will find that this will promote the premature failure of the weld joint, and that's what you see. Even if the joint is fine, but if the bead angle is not perfect, then it will be also acting as a stress razor at the toe of the weld, and that in turn many times leads to the failure. Because of the high stress concentration, you'll see very frequently, you'll see that the fracture is taking place because of the very localization of the stresses. This is what you see in form of, like, say, underbead cracks, and this is very common thing, like stress localization in presence of the defects and discontinuities which is taking place. Yeah, this is another important thing, like, which will explain how the property alteration in the weld joint is taking place. Okay, so whether it is the fusion welding or it is a solid state joining where little heat is being generated due to the friction. So in solid state joining process also some heat is generated. So if we see that how the heat is affecting to the weld as well as to the heat affected zone, we have to see that the kind of temperature variation in vicinity of the weld nugget is taking place. So if we take a point extremely close to the fusion boundary or to the weld nugget, point 1, point 2 and point 3, so the variation in temperature as a function of time can be represented like this. So very high rate of heating, this is like typical fusion welding process. We are using either arc or where we are using either arc or laser or plasma, not like solid state joining process where rate of heating is low. But if you talk of the point away from the fusion boundary, the rate of heating is little slow, that you can see from the slope. Similarly for the slower. Likewise, the peak temperature is also different for 3 different points, and it is cooling rate is also different. So in general, the point very close to will be experiencing higher heating rate, higher peak temperature and higher cooling rate. Similarly, the points away from will be experiencing lower heating rate, lower peak temperature and lower cooling rate. And this has a lot of effect on the joint performance. Let's say if the particular temperature above which is crucial, and as soon as the metal is heated, you will see the temperature at point 1 is heated to the high temperature for this much period, and while the point at point 2 it will be heated for this much period, and for point 3 it will be heated for this much period. So that high temperature retention period is high for, it is maximum for 1. So not just the temperature, but the period is also high. Then it is somewhat lower for the point 2 and for the lower for, so high temperature and the high temperature exposure duration, that these are the two things that affect the properties significantly. If the temperature is high, the changes will be more, and if the temperature remains, high temperature remains there for longer time, then the damage which is experienced by the zone next to the fusion boundary, that will be more. Okay, and this kind of damage that will be reducing. So this is these are the different things that can be interpreted, or the information that we can obtain from the weld thermal cycle and how it affects the weld joint. So in general, if higher the temperature and higher the time of high temperature retention for longer time, then the thermal damage to the metallurgical changes in the heat affected zone will be more, and thermal damage will be more. And lesser the peak temperature for shorter period, then the related adverse effects will be less, which are mostly in form of recrystallization and grain growth. These are two things which happen. So higher the temperature and greater the for longer time, greater will be the recrystallization, greater will be the grain growth. Okay, so these two the changes in the metal next to the fusion boundary will be more when the temperature and time is more at a particular location. So this will be leading to the increased recrystallization and increased grain growth, which may be good, which may not be good in number of cases. So like say if the metal is severely affecting the grain growth, very high grain growth is taking place, the properties may be compromised very badly. But if the transformation hardening is taking place, it will not be that much affecting, it will not have that much adverse effects. There are other aspects also, like in precipitation hardenable systems. If you take like this, which is precipitation strengthened, so the zone close to the fusion boundary or weld nugget, they will be experiencing greater dissolution or the less loss of precipitates, and that will in turn will be leading to the greater thermal softening, a greater softening of the heat affected zone. Okay, so because of these changes which are taking place in the heat affected zone, it is very problematic. Loss of corrosion resistance, undesirable undesirable changes in mechanical properties, which may be in form of softening and hardening, and embrittlement and increased cracking tendency. So these are undesirable things. And these changes, what I said, like weld thermal cycle, when it is imposed during the fusion welding or during the solid state joining, it brings in lot of changes. And those changes, say in typical fusion weld joint for iron carbon system, what we see, very coarse grained zone is found next to the fusion boundary. There in most of the alloys having like solidus and liquidus, so in those cases we may get the partial melting zone also. Okay, so next to the weld zone you have partial melting zone, then heat affected zone, and then there is a fine grained zone, and then partially fine grained zone, like this. This is the typical behavior shown by the steels. Fine grained zone. So all these are the part of the HAZ only. Okay, so wherever, whatever, and here this is the kind of rolled one. You will see the rolled structure. So having the elongation or orientation in particular direction. So higher aspect ratio, those cases. So this is linked. So these various zones are linked with the kind of maximum temperature which is exposed, which is experienced by the metal. Like this is solidus and liquidus, giving you the two-phase zone. Then the HAZ, like say from the lower crystallization temperature to the this is about the zone which will be experiencing the coarse grained structure, then fine grained structure, then partially fine grained structure, like this. And then recrystallized zone and unaffected zone. Okay, so this is like a relation for the steels. And in case of the precipitation hardenable systems, as I have said, this is the fusion boundary. Next to the fusion boundary, very coarse grained HAZ is observed, and in this one you will see all hardening precipitates which you can see away. These are not visible here because these get dissolved, so this is called as reversion. Next to the fusion boundary, we will see the reversion where complete loss of precipitates will be taking place, and because of this, there will be complete loss of due to the complete loss of the precipitates, there will be softening. So here, if I just try to draw the hardness distribution, so it may go like this. So this is the weak zone being formed due to the resolution, and this weld nugget zone, you see, it is it can be hard, it can be soft, it can be strong, it can be weak. It depends upon our filler or the kind of electrode that we are using. But the thing that is being governed, so you may have the weld of this kind or you may have weld of this kind. So here the weld and base both are same, but the weak HAZ is being formed, and here in this case the weld is weaker, HAZ is further weaker, and base is stronger. So it depends what we have chosen for developing a weld metal. This is about just to show how the HAZ is HAZ of the how the HAZ responds to the weld thermal cycle. So if you see the weld thermal cycle very close to the fusion boundary, this is weld, and next side, other side, both the sides we have HAZ, right? So the point 1 very close to the fusion boundary will have the weld thermal cycle of this kind, right? and then 2 will have weld thermal cycle of this kind, and third will have weld thermal cycle of this kind. And if you see, the maximum severity will be affected by the zone next to the fusion boundary, and then little less softening is taking place, that is the hardness or strength, and so minimum softening is taking place away from the, and then we have the base metal. Now this is about the weld. So here the weld is weak. Actually this weld is made of the weak material, but weld can be like this as well, depending upon the our choice of filler. Okay, and what happens when we use the welding process of different type or different parameters? So if it is like say the GTAW, PAW, laser, okay, so the three are the different types of the process of the different power densities. So minimum heat input will be of this, somewhat more heat input of this, and GTAW of this. This is one way. Second is you work with the current of 100 ampere, like say GTAW, okay. You work with the current of 100 ampere, 150 ampere or 200 ampere. So it will be giving you for the same V of like say 12 volt, same speed, say of say 100 mm per minute. You will notice it in the same way, like the heat input will be different in these three cases. So what happens when the heat input is minimum, the grain size is fine. HZ is, weld is narrow, HZ is also narrow. Weld is little wider when the heat input is little more, like this, and HZ is also wider, and widest heat affected zone is formed when the heat input is maximum, like this, and weld is also wide. So that's what we can see from these the hardness distribution away from the fusion boundary. So weakest zone of the greater width is formed in case of the, in third case, when the heat input is maximum, like this, and this is attributed to the coarse grains, complete loss of the precipitates, etc. Okay. So now one base metal can respond in completely different way. So as I have said repeatedly number of times, like depending upon our choice for the filler or depending upon the base metal, we may get the different trend of variation properties. Like one typical trend of variation is like where starting from the base to the weld it is same. So this is like the matching weld properties, one side another side, right, and this is weld. But at the same time you may have the weld of this kind also, right. So the weld is weaker, base is stronger, or you may have the weld of this kind also. So where the weld is stronger and the base is weaker. So what you get, that will depend upon the type of the metal system and the way by which it is responding. Okay, let's take this example here. Like here, like the FSW joint of 7039 aluminum alloy, which is a precipitation hardenable aluminum alloy, when it is welded in like say T6 condition, like peak hardened, peak strengthened condition, that is this. So the HZ is very adversely affected. You find a very weak zone in the HZ. When it is welded in the like naturally aged condition, you'll see that across the weld the joint properties are almost same, although the weak zone is still in the HZ region. And when it is welded in the annealed condition, what we notice that the weld is stronger because of the work hardening effect, but still weak zone is in the HZ zone. HZ is somewhere here. So because annealing will be leading to the weakening of the material, softening of the material. So depending upon the condition of the alloy also, you will see that there is a great difference in the properties that we get in. Okay, this is about the steel only. Okay, how the HZ properties are affected. So here, let's say transformation hardenable system, TS system, like steel. So when like say we measure the hardness distribution across this line, okay, what we get, this is the base, it's fine. So this is the property, okay, and this is the hardness. And when we go through the HZ region, the hardness is increasing, right? Now The weld can be weak or weld can be strong. It depends upon our choice. So here in this case the weld is weak. That's fine. Okay. It could have been of this also, depending upon our filler choice. If we take the hardness distribution at this level, this is like HZ only, hardness distribution across the HZ. So obviously severity here will be less, then it will be increasing gradually, and maximum will be here. Then it will be coming down, right? So hardness distribution is going like this, and this is attributed to the kind of the transformation hardening which is taking place from, like say, austenite to the martensitic transformation, which will be taking place in the heat affected zone for this is transformation hardenable metal system. Okay, so this will give you the more clearer picture what is happening actually. So in this case we have eliminated this zone only, and we have brought these two together. Okay, so depending upon depending upon the location of the measurement, you may find the different kind of the hardness distribution or property variation. This is just an example only where what we can see is like when the steel is subjected to the FSW. So steel FSW of the steel frequently leads to the transformation hardening in the HZ as well as the weld nugget, and that's why you'll see it's fine, like 200-220 HV is the hardness of the steel of the base metal, but when it is subjected to the FSW, because of the heating, like say 800 to 1000 degrees centigrade, followed by subsequent cooling coupled with the work hardening, you invariably find martensite in the weld and the HZ, and because of this only you will find the higher hardness. Okay. Residual stress, about this I have talked a little bit earlier. Like a weld, when it is developed, after the welding it leads to, say this is the weld which is being developed, and after the cooling what we get, say this is the section which was welded long back. So this will be showing the residual stress distribution of this kind. So next to the weld you have the compressive residual stress, but along the weld you have the tensile residual stress, and this tensile residual stress will be reducing the tensile load carrying capacity, or you can say that tensile yield strength, tensile ultimate strength, and then it reduces the toughness also, or the fracture toughness is also reduced, and many times embrittlement of the steels also take place. So it's not good, apart from distortion, so many other adverse effects will be taking place. So this also adversely affects the joint performance. Now coming to the two processes about which I'll talk a little bit. The GTAW is one of the, as I have said, GTAW offers very cleanest weld like this, okay, because of the low oxygen and nitrogen. So it's good, but the problem with this GTAW is that it offers very limited penetration, very less depth of the melting in one go like this. So if it goes in like this, then very limited melting will means it require a lot of multiple passes if the thick plates need to be welded. So limited penetration of 2.5 to 3 mm only, and so for thick sheet welding we need welding of thick plates, we need multiple passes, and also the penetration may be inconsistent, and because of this primarily on low penetration, the productivity is low welding speed, and if thick plates are to be welded, then it requires the edge preparation. Okay. So this is the typical geometry of the weld bead on plate. When GTAW arc is passed, we get the wider weld and limited penetration. Okay, this is say 5 mm thick steel sheets. Okay. If you have to weld very thick plates, then of course we require multiple passes. That's what you can see in this form. Okay. And when we do the multiple passes, we come across like regular heat build up, residual stress and distortion, and favorable metallurgical transformation, sensitization, sigma phase formation in stainless steel. Basically this is observed, and compromise in the mechanical properties and the corrosion behavior. So what is the way out? Way out is here to see if the entire thick plate can be welded just in one go using GTAW through by realizing the high penetration. So one pass weld is developed. Okay, so for this we worked on this activated flux GTAW or flux assisted GTAW, where certain oxide fluxes are mixed with the acetone, or these can be also mixed with some ethanol also. So mixture is developed, then mixture is applied over the plates to be welded using the paintbrush approach, and then GTAW arc is passed through this. So initially we were getting very wide weld and shallow penetration, and but when we apply the flux and then arc, we find that the bead geometry is little modified, the depth is increased, and the width is somewhat reduced. And as a result of this, we find a lot of benefits, like residual stress is reduced, distortion tendency is reduced, HZ is reduced, creep life is enhanced, productivity is enhanced, and production cost is reduced significantly. And in similar metal welds, it doesn't require any filler also, but it may be needed in case of the dissimilar metals. These are the various process parameters: flux, type of flux, and the flux per unit area or its thickness, so that we measure in terms of like mg per unit area. Okay, these are the various parameters associated with this process. These are simple GTAW welding process parameters. These two are related with the fluxes. And what leads to the high penetration? Because penetration, like say if earlier it was 2.5 to 3 mm, it can be increased as high as 15 mm in one go. So that is good if it can be realized using GTAW. So it works on the two aspects. One is the constriction of arc. When the flux is applied and the arc evaporates the fluxes, it forms a certain kind of the electron rich environment. So these ionized atom charge particles, electrons form thermoionic emission. So this is a typical arc welding process. So the point is simple: when the flux is applied, it comes arc, which was of the large size earlier, its cross section is reduced. So the heat which was being delivered over a larger area now is getting delivered over a smaller area. So this will simply be increasing the watt per mm square. And so this means that under the identical conditions, it will be delivering the heat over the smaller area, and so that will be increasing the power density associated with the GTAW. And so it will be applying more arc pressure, and so the deeper penetration. This is one thing. This mechanism, there are two hypotheses which have been used to explain the increased depth of penetration. The second is about the Marangoni convection. What it is, Marangoni convection is about, conventionally what happens, like the temperature is maximum at the center. Okay, so maximum at the center, and minimum temperature in the weld is at the fusion boundary. Okay, so surface tension is maximum at the boundary and surface tension is minimum at the center. And you know, fluid flows from the low surface tension towards the high surface tension. So as a result of this, heat is as the molten metal flows like this from center towards the sides. So this is the typical trend. Higher the temperature, with the increase in temperature, surface tension comes down. This is typically what is observed. But when the flux is applied, the surface tension behavior is reversed. Higher the temperature, higher the surface tension. So as a result of this, surface tension is maximum at the center and surface tension is minimum at the boundary. and therefore the flow takes place from the boundaries towards the center. Now what is happening? Heat you are delivering at the center, flow is taking place from boundaries towards the center. So whatever heat is delivered, that flows directly down to the unmelted zone, and that's how it melts in. While what was happening earlier, like there was a pool and heat were delivering, and that was getting transported due to the flow from center towards the boundaries, and that is why we were getting the wider and wider width and shallow penetration. So this is called Marangoni convection. This is just like a reverse of Marangoni convection. The conventional flow is about the Marangoni convection, and the reversal of that is a reverse Marangoni convection, and that is happening due to the addition of the flux. So this is just like the two types of the stainless steels, like austenitic stainless steel and ferritic stainless steel of 10 mm thickness. When like the flux, I don't think it has been mentioned, like say the SiO2 chromium oxide kind of, or MO3 kind of the fluxes were used. I'm not sure which one, but the optimized flux composition was used using the two different currents, welding speed, arc length, electrode tip angle, and also these are the other conditions. So what we can see here, when we weld, the width to the depth ratio, this is around like say 0.8. so the almost square weld, like say 0.92 width to the depth ratio is realized, depth to width ratio, d by w. So d is less than the width, and when it is very close to 1 means the width is almost same as the depth. So when we have this situation, we will find that the width at the top and the bottom is almost same, and as a result of this, shrinkage is uniform, and because of this, angular distortion tendency is reduced. Okay, so as I said, this activated flux dTAW will be helping to realize the greater depth of penetration and reduce distortion. Single pass thick weld can be developed in one go. Okay. So what are the options if we have to cut down our heat further? So one is like I have already talked how these two works in, because of the higher power density you have to supply less heat. Then there are other like solid state joining processes like FSW, friction welding, ultrasonic or explosive welding processes. So the solid state joining processes work on the various principles. One is like macroscopic deformation, like you take thick plates and a large scale plastic deformation of like say 5 mm, 10 mm metal is deformed from one side to another. In micro deformation, where like say the plates are kept in overlapping position and then ultrasonic probe is applied, so interfacial micro scale plastic deformation of 2 to 3 micrometer across the interface takes place. So this is a micro level deformation. And in the diffusion, you see, take the two components together in a smooth polished condition and kept in vacuum at high temperature, so the diffusion across the interface facilitates the development of the joint. So these are, but still the heat input is too high in this case, because it is like 0.5, 0.6 times of the melting point. That's the kind of temperature range in which it is heated for longer times, maybe 1 hour, 2 hours, like that. Okay, so this is what happens in case of the ultrasonic welding. The two are kept. When the process happens, interfacial deformation takes place, and that in turn leads to the development of the weld joint. Heat generated is very less. In friction welding, I'm not sure if it will work. In friction welding, there is a friction stir welding. There is a tool. Okay. There is a tool, then there is a shoulder, then there is a pin, and the components to be joined here. So the rotation of the tool will be leading to the softening, then plastic deformation, and then development of joint through the metallic continuity. Let me try if it works in, I'm not sure. Okay, so in the solid state, what are the benefits of the solid state joining process? Like it doesn't like FSW, no alloying, no loss of alloying elements, like what we have seen in case of fusion welding processes. No filler, distortion is limited, energy efficient, and environment friendly because there is no shielding gas, no use of chemicals, no slag or fume formation, metallurgical fine metallurgical structure is produced, and there is less tendency of cracking. It's not like absent, but its cracking tendency is very limited. So when FSW is applied, what we see, like a very fine grained weld nugget is formed, and thereafter there is a zone which is next to the weld nugget is the thermomechanically affected zone TMAZ, and then some frictional heat is transported to the underlying base metal, and that in turn leads to the HZ formation, and thereafter we have the base metal. Okay, so the maximum rise in temperature, so absence of fusion, less heat input, plastic deformation and consolidation. On the other hand, the rise in temperature is limited, short high temperature retention. So these are the two good. If the temperature is high and high temperature retention is also high, then these are harmful, as I have explained earlier. Okay, this is one variant only where although I'm not talking about the like stationary shoulder FSW, but anyway, here this is one typical case where the shoulder and steel and aluminum is being used to develop the joint. So the pin just touches to the steel side, and here primarily it is the tool is plunged into the aluminum side, and so it is the deformation of aluminum which takes place during the FSW in case of steel and aluminum welding. And here this side little like say 0.52 to 0.2 plunge takes place inside the steel, otherwise mostly it is in the sides of the aluminum only. So this is a typical case where you have seen that typically the shoulder and the pin both shoulder and pin both rotates in conventional FSW. So the shoulder also generates a lot of heat, and because of this a wide heat affected zone is formed. So idea here is to see, like, let's make the shoulder stationary and just rotate the tool only so that the joint can be developed. So here when this is done, like the shoulder in conventionally shoulder rotates, but here we made the shoulder stationary, SS stationary shoulder FSW, and when only the pin rotates, it leads to the different kind of the HZ and the weld nugget because of the reduced heat generation. Here earlier the primary heat was being generated by the shoulder only, but now the only pin will be generating the heat. So here you see the weld nugget zone size is reduced and the HZ size is almost eliminated, or it is reduced very significantly, and that is what we can see. So here this is the conventional FSW joint, and the second one is like SS FSW joint. Okay, SS FSW joint, right? So the nugget size and HZ size both are reduced, and that's what we can confirm through our the hardness distribution across the weld joint. Also, like the conventional normal FSW joint, it gives us the wider drop in the hardness or strength of the joint, like this. This is what is, you can say, as the HZ, and the wider nugget zone size as well. When the SS FSW is used, nugget zone size is reduced and the sharp gradient in the hardness distribution is observed. Okay, so that is what we can see here. The SS FSW reduces the HZ as well as reduces the nugget size also. Okay. That's what we can see from here. the strength comparison of SSFSW and strength comparison of SSFSW and the conventional FSW. So the joint is of greater yield, greater elongation and the higher yield strength. So, but here one thing is to be kept in mind, since we are generating less heat using the SSFSW, stationary shoulder FSW, so we need to apply the greater forging pressure. The forging force which is applied in SSFSW is higher than what is used in case of the conventional FSW. Okay, so here this is FSW is also used in another variant, in another form of variant, that is the like FSP, friction stir processing, for improving the mechanical properties. So for improving the mechanical properties, why it is important? Because most of the failures or fractures triggered by the surface, triggered from the surface. So surface modification is important. So what we can do for surface modification, like improve the mechanical properties like toughness and the hardness of the surfaces. Let's have uniformity or homogeneity in composition and properties of the surfaces, and let us eliminate the discontinuities and defects if they are present at the surface. Many times welds and the cast surfaces have the defects, and if those are there, then the failure tendency is increased. So what we can do, these are the various approaches which are used to strengthen the metal. So if FSP can help to refine, if it can be used to work hardened by localized plastic deformation, these are the two things. Dispersion hardening also can be used by applying the FSP, friction stir processing. If we can reinforce something, like just have the slot and put in something reinforcing agent and then do the FSP over the surface, so that these particles get reinforced. So that's what is there in dispersion hardening. Mostly simple FSP, where just a surface structure is modified through the work hardening and through the grain refinement based approach. Okay, so this is how it is done, like large scale plastic deformation coupled with the consolidation. Okay, so when FSP is applied, initially the grain structure may be very coarse, maybe needle shape. So these kind of things are not good, because these will be acting as a stress region, will be weakening the material, promoting the fracture, promoting the wear, etc. So if the surface layers up to certain depth can be refined, like say, so using the FSP we can refine the surface structure up to certain depth. Underlying structure is still same. So this kind of refinement will be helping to improve the properties. So that refines the microconstituents, eliminates the pores through the plastic deformation and consolidation, breaks the inclusions also if they are present, work hardens the surface layer because of the plastic deformation, and transformation hardening can also take place in the metals like steel. If the steel is subjected to the FSP, you will see that the surface has the metastatic transformation and improved distribution of the microconstituents. So these things actually help in improving the hardness and the wear resistance and the surface properties. This is how it is done. Surface up to the certain depth is modified. I'll quickly go through the just skip this slide. This is the same thing. So this is the need. Like say initially the coarse grains, then it is refined to the very fine grains, and when it is done, so to deal with these are the issues. Lower stresses required for crack nucleation when the grain size is large and it is needle shape. High stress concentration, debonding between the particle and matrix takes place, which facilitates the void formation. Okay. On the other hand, if we have to improve upon the properties, so because of these factors, you'll see your strength, ductility, fracture toughness, fatigue, wear resistance, everything is compromised. So if we can refine the grain structure to the sub-micron size, then this will help in improving the properties. Like this is a typical case only, where hyper eutectic aluminum silicon alloy is used, having the very eutectic silicon needles like this. Okay, these are harmful, and the big silicon particles also like this, primary silicon particles. So these are not good actually from the tensile properties point of view. So when FSP is carried out, so this is the FSP zone. So you'll see all silicon needles and large number of the primary silicon particles are broken down, and that in turn helps to improve the properties, primarily in terms of wear resistance. Say in this case it was measured. So say adhesive wear, like rubbing of the aluminum alloy against the steel, like for say typical piston and piston ring kind of the metal systems. So when we have the cast base metal, it offers the higher wear rate as compared to the case when we have applied the FSP on the cast aluminum alloy. Under identical conditions, it performs better as compared to the S cast alloy. So this is like simple comparative study of what we can do for improving the surface properties. Okay, so that's all from my side. This is acknowledgement, like whatever I have presented was was an outcome of many things that I have learned after the various activities that we have undertaken for the DST, CSIR, BRNS, ARDV. They have supported like anything for carrying out the R&D activities. Then a lot of PhD students and PG students have done, they have spent many sleepless nights for contributing the things. So contribution of the PG and PhD students is also duly acknowledged. I've used the infrastructure of IIT in carrying out all these things. So obviously IIT Roorkee infrastructure is well acknowledged, and well-wishers across the globe, and grace of God, all that is needed to do anything